everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com and I'm here to take a look at what happened at New Japan Pro Wrestling's Sakura Genesis. Now, Sakura Genesis, for those who don't know, is a relatively new pay-per-view, or a new name for the pay-per-view, where it's kind of one of their biggest shows of the year. Not as big as Wrestle Kingdom, and maybe not even as big as Dominion, but certainly one of the biggest shows of the year. If they had a big four, it would definitely be in there. And this was a very good show indeed. There were some fantastic matches, particularly as the card went on. There was kind of a gradient. The matches kind of generally got better towards the end of the show. The first few, maybe a bit hit and miss, but on the whole, I think this will be remembered as a very good show indeed. So let's just take a look at every single match from Sakura Genesis and take a look at the big events that happened. First up, a tag match between the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson, who recently had that awesome tag team main event in Long Beach, California against Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, but this time they were facing another Bullet Club team, Chase Owens and Yujiro Takahashi. Not to be confused with Hiromu Takahashi. Hiromu Takahashi is the one with the cat and the weird coat and the hair and all the craziness. Yujiro Takahashi is the Tokyo Pimp. He's kind of the godfather of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Maybe not the best gimmick in terms of modern 21st century outlook on society, but nevertheless, still an entertaining character, I guess. It's alright because they lost. The Young Bucks picked up a big rebound win after their loss in Long Beach. They are now back on track and hopefully we'll build a winning record again. This match was a lot friendlier. There was a lot less conflict than the match against Omega and Ibushi. There was handshakes at the start and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, you have to remember the conflict, not just within Bullet Club, but within the Young Bucks themselves. Matt and Nick Jackson maybe are on different paths. It looks like Matt's straying more towards Cody's evil side of things, whereas Nick is more sympathetic to Kenny Omega's side of things. But I guess we'll build on that a little bit as we talk about it a bit more. But in this match, Matt Jackson picked up the win for his team with a sharpshooter, while Nick Jackson took out the other member of the team. So it was a good rebound win for the Young Bucks, and I think the only problem with this match may have been that it was a bit of a predictable one. Everyone kind of knew that the Young Bucks were going to win, especially after having such a big loss. There was no real way that they were going to lose, especially in the opener. They were put in their sort of traditional slot as hot openers because they're exciting and high-flying and everything. No way was this match as good as the one against Omega and Ibushi, but then again, that wasn't the role of this match on the show. It wasn't the main event, it was the opener. But it still got things off to a pretty decent start. Next up, another tag match between Toru Yano and Tomohiro Ishii, two members of the Chaos faction, and two members of Suzuki Gun in Iizuka, the kind of wild crazy man, and Taichi, the guy who everyone just hates him a lot. Everyone hates Taichi. He's just one of those rare things in modern wrestling, just a genuine heel. Not a cool heel if people want to cheer because he's cool, just a detestable heel, so that's pretty good. The match itself, I wasn't too big a fan of this match. I think sometimes Yano's comedy matches have a place in New Japan because they're a bit different to a lot of the ultra serious action we see, but when Yano is paired with Iizuka, another heavily gimmicky wrestler, like he's an animal, he's a bit like George the Animal Steel, then I think that maybe it can be a bit too much. There might have been a bit too little focus on the actual wrestling and a bit too much on the antics. But then again, this was an ultra serious card in some of the later matches, so I do see why it was booked like this. Ultimately, the baby faces, Ishii and Yano, picked up the victory with a classic Yano roll-up. That's how he wins matches. He undoes turnbuckle pads, he tricks people into running into each other, he distracts the referee, low blows people, and he often wins with a sneaky little roll-up. That's why they call him the Sublime Master Thief. If you're not familiar with New Japan, I haven't made that up. He is genuinely called the Sublime Master Thief. Good on you, Yano. You do you, bro. You do you. Next up, the never openweight six-man title match between the champions, the Gorillas of Destiny, and their big friend, Bad Luck Fale. Again, another tag team in the Bullet Club who recently came off a big loss. They, of course, lost to Cody and Marty Scurll in Long Beach. They were facing Ryusuke Taguchi and two of his mates. He often brings babyfaces under his Taguchi Japan banner. It was him flanked by two big old boys, Michael Elgin, the Canadian, and Togi Makabe, just a big... Like, he's been in New Japan for a good number of years now. He used to be a main eventer towards the top of the card. He's kind of slipped down a little bit in the past few years, but he's still regarded as someone who could realistically beat or challenge anyone on the card. So a very useful position for him to be in. So yeah, Taguchi, Elgin, and Makabe against the three members of Bullet Club. Now, I personally thought that the babyfaces might win this match. The never openweight belts often change hands with quite a lot of regularity. There's not really too many long reigns, but actually the Bullet Club members picked up the win. Tama Tonga pinned Ryusuke Taguchi, and I kind of see that. Tama Tonga's a heavyweight, Taguchi's a junior heavyweight, and while there's not too big a divide in New Japan, like sometimes you can buy a junior heavyweight at least putting up a fight, more often than not, heavyweights are regarded as just having a bit more firepower than their smaller counterparts. I also think it was probably a wise decision to have the Bullet Club members retain their titles, just because, especially the Guerrillas of Destiny, they obviously came off that big loss to Cody and Scurll, and I think New Japan want to keep all components of this big Bullet Club feud relatively strong, just as everything moves forward, so it doesn't get too one-sided in anyone's favour. I'm sure fans of Kenny Omega may have something to say about that in terms of how much of the spotlight Cody is currently enjoying, but we'll get onto that later on in the card. Next up, another six-man match between Hiroshi Tanahashi, the ace of New Japan, and his teammates Juice Robinson and David Finlay. They were facing off against three members of the Chaos faction, the US champion currently, Jay White, who recently retained his title against Adam Page in Long Beach in a divisive match, I'll say, and his partners Hiroki Goto and Yoshi-Hashi. This was a good match. There was a lot of energy in it, really high paced. I think it was probably the best match on the show up to this point, although obviously it was eclipsed by some much better matches later on. I was a little bit surprised, not in terms of the result. I think I did expect Juice, Finlay and Tanahashi to win, but I think I expected Juice or David Finlay to pick up the pinfall, particularly as David Finlay is currently challenging Jay White for the US Championship. He's the next #1 contender in line to the belt. But instead, it was Tanahashi who picked up the victory with a high fly flow, his big sort of crossbody kind of frog splash kind of thing. He used that on Yoshi-Hashi, picked up the victory, and I was confused. I was like, why have they given the win to someone who maybe has the least going on right now in terms of storyline? Of course, if you've watched the show, it becomes abundantly clear why they're giving Tanahashi some momentum right now as the show goes on. He is going to be a very, very key figure heading forwards because he's going to feud with someone. I'm not going to say who, I'll say who a bit later, but it's tremendously exciting in my opinion. Next up, yet another six-man, this one with a lot of title implications. Two belts were kind of being alluded to here. It wasn't a title match, but I think it's going to lead to two title matches in the future. It was Suzuki Gun versus LIJ. LIJ were represented by Naito, Sanada, and the returning Evil back from his broken orbital bone. Welcome back, Evil. They were taking on Minoru Suzuki, the leader of the Suzuki Gun stable, and Killer Elite Squad, the team of Davey Boy Smith Jr. and his big old pal, Lance Archer, who loves spitting water just directly into the faces of people on his way to the ring. You disgusting, big, hairy bastard. This match was another solid undercard match. I was a little bit worried that there'd be too many Suzuki Gun kind of heelish shenanigans, sometimes which overstep the mark a little bit and kind of ruin the immersion in the match because the referee has to just turn a blind eye to a lot of stuff like big old blatant chair shots, run-ins, that sort of thing, especially when Suzuki Gun jumped LIJ before the bell, but at the same time, it kind of developed into a good match. I think Sanada might have been my MVP of the match here. He's one of the slickest wrestlers on the New Japan roster, and he did receive a little bit of a push earlier in the year with that match against Okada, and even though he's kind of subsided back into the tag division now, I still think he's very much one for the future. Ultimately, Suzuki Gun picked up the win. Killer Elite Squad destroyed Sanada and Evil with a pair of their double team finishes. I can't quite think of the word right now. It might be the Killer Bomb or something like that. I'm sure someone will know. Let me know in the comments down below. They got the pinfall on Evil, which I was really surprised about because he obviously just made his return. I thought he may pick up the pinfall for LIJ, but Suzuki Gun won, and then something very interesting happened after the match. Naito got on the mic and called out Suzuki and established himself as the next #1 contender for the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. Naito, I reckon, will go down in history as one of the most notable Intercontinental champions in New Japan history, purely for the way that he treated the belt when he held it. When Naito held the Intercontinental Championship, he was at the pinnacle of his heel run. He's now a bit of a pseudo babyface, and I don't know if I really like him in that role. I'm not sure how I'm going to like that going forwards, especially against an out-and-out heel like Suzuki. I prefer Naito being an out-and-out heel as well, but I guess it's one of those instances where he's just too popular and too good at it. You can't avoid but turn him even partially face at some point. But when Naito was Intercontinental Champion, he would trash the belt, he would throw it around, he'd forget it and leave it in the ring. It was part of his whole disrespectful shtick as the leader of LIJ. Eventually, the belt was returned to its pristine state, but it looked like a state once Naito had finished with it. I guess if he wins the belt from Suzuki, Will he do the same again, or now that he's a bit more of a face, will he treat it with a bit more respect? Ultimately, I think Suzuki will retain the belt, and this angle will ultimately be part of Naito's gradual slide before his eventual redemption, which of course started way back at Wrestle Kingdom in January when he lost that big main event against Okada. We all wanted you to win, Naito! We all wanted you to win! You bottled it! You broke our hearts. Next up, a tag team match, or like a 3-team tag team match, a 3-way dance with tag team members. For the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, the defending champions were 2 members of Suzuki Gun, Desperado and Kanemaru. I've met Desperado, he's a lovely lad, even though he wears a mask and acts like a bit of a dickhead in character. He's actually a bit of a joker, a bit of a lovely cheeky scamp. Got distracted there. They were going up against 2 members of LIJ, Bushi and Hiromu Takahashi, the one with the cat, not the pimp, the one with the cat, and also Roppongi 3K, who recently won the opening match in Long Beach, of course, alongside their mentor and friend, Rocky Romero. Interestingly, a result I did not predict, Suzuki Gun retained their titles with some kind of overly heelish antics. There was a belt shot involved and that sort of thing. I thought this match may have been one of the weaker ones on the card, maybe alongside the Yano match, just because it dragged on a little bit too long. At this stage of the card, I didn't really want to see a quarter of an hour 3-way tag team battle, especially with all the heelish antics going on. I don't want to sound too critical because, again, on the whole, this was a really good show. I just think that it wore my patience a little bit thin, but congratulations again to Desperado and Kanemaru for picking up the victory and retaining the Junior Heavyweight Tag Team championships. Next up, potentially my match of the night. I still am quite torn between this one and the main event. This was the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship match between the champion, Will Ospreay, and his nemesis, the Raven to his Tommy Dreamer, Marty Scurll, the villain Marty Scurll, the Bullet Club member Marty Scurll, the bird Marty Scurll. Thinks he's a bird, I think. What are those whoop whoop things about that he does? I guess he thinks he's a bird. I've never really understood it. This match was absolutely killer. Will Ospreay wrestled above average for him, which, as you know, I'm a big fan of Will Ospreay, which means that it was an insane performance from him. Marty Scurll wrestled well above his average as well. It's kind of easy to forget, actually, that Scurll is a really good wrestler just because he's so immersed in his gimmick these days. He's such a character, especially when he's goofing around as a member of the Bullet Club. But when he puts his serious spectacles on and really gets down to it, he is one of the top heel wrestlers in the world, I think. He and Ospreay have unbelievable chemistry from their years wrestling together in their younger days on the UK independent scene, and the key moment in this match, I think you'll know it if you've watched it, was a Spanish fly from the apron to the floor. The Spanish fly is that move that's often hit in the ring off an Irish whip, where the other guy will run in and the person hitting the move will catch them and do a back flip. The person taking the move will do a simultaneous front flip and they'll land. It's like a nice little momentum shifter. It's really good. They did one onto the apron, and Ospreay kind of caught his head on the way down, and he was damn, you could tell it had actually hurt him, especially when he cut his post-match promo, which I'll get onto in a second. But you could tell that Ospreay was a little bit shaken up by that. Never want to be sympathetic, Marty Scurll then relentlessly targeted the head and the neck at one stage, just stomping the head and neck of Ospreay. That was pretty brutal, but ultimately Ospreay picked up the victory. This match went nearly half an hour and it didn't feel like it. It felt much shorter because it was just so damn enjoyable. Nobody is better, I think, in the world at the minute at pulling out a result out of nowhere, coming back with a lot of babyface fire and hitting some ridiculous moves. No one combines all those things as well as Ospreay at the moment, especially the ending sequence where the crowd was just molten hot for him, and he hit the Os Cutter and won and defeated Marty Scurll. I think another thing this match benefited from was being unpredictable, just because Marty has had Ospreay's number for so many of their previous matches. Ospreay got the pinfall over him at Wrestle Kingdom in January, but you can never really count out Scurll when he's against Ospreay. He's kind of his kryptonite in a way. After the match was over and Scurll was taken away, Ospreay then got on the microphone and called out in a respectful way and in a very dazed way because he'd been through such a war. He called out Kushida, who was on Japanese commentary for the match, and he said, "I want you to challenge me for the title," which was a very unique way of doing things. Usually in New Japan, obviously, the challenger comes out and goes, "I want a shot at that belt." Ospreay went, "Look, Kushida, you're still regarded as the ace of this division. I want to be the new ace. I'm challenging you to challenge me for my championship." Very unique twist, and it really shows how confident New Japan are that Ospreay is set to be a megastar, maybe even the successor to Kushida in the long run. Next up, a big grudge tag team match, the penultimate match of the night between Cody and Hangman Page against the Golden Lovers, Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi. This match was, as well as the 2 title matches either side of it, the best match on the card and the most intense match on the card. This run of 3 matches was really superb and will, I think, at the end of the year, make everyone look back on Sakura Genesis as one of the strongest shows of the year for any promotion. This was a really good match. It went about 20 minutes, and maybe surprisingly, Cody and Hangman Page picked up the victory over Omega and Ibushi, the hottest tag team in the world right now, especially after knocking off the Young Bucks last week. Whenever Kenny and Cody were facing each other, it was obviously really intense building up to their singles match at Supercard of Honor. At one point, a chair was thrown directly into Cody's face, or into Kenny's face, sorry, but Kenny got his revenge by hitting Cody with a kick which busted him open, which just went to make him look even more deranged and evil than he already looks, which is fantastic. Cody not only did the excellent character work that we expect of him in this match, he also wrestled a lot better than I think most people would expect of Cody. When he wants to, he can really have an excellent match. He just often prioritizes, I guess, character work over moves, and I can't fault him for that, especially in this day and age when everyone can hit ridiculous moves. But it does draw a lot of criticism online, but I think even those critics could watch this match and see that Cody was really going above and beyond. The ending came when Cody got a sneaky little roll up on Ibushi, 1, 2, 3. Maybe a little bit of a surprising result considering the role that the Golden Lovers have been on, but I think it was the right call just because it builds even more to that big match between Kenny and Cody at Supercard of Honor. I'm really looking forward to that now, especially when the heels beat down Ibushi after the match in the middle of the ring and Omega ran in to make the save, all like fired up. I'm really looking forward to that Kenny-Cody match, not just because of all the storyline behind it and the whole Bullet Club thing, but also because when Cody's matched against someone who's an excellent wrestler, he can have a really good match with them. He had a really good match with Okada last year, and I think this match against Omega could be the best match of Cody's career ever. And finally, the big main event between the IWGP Heavyweight Champion Kazuchika Okada and the New Japan Cup winner 2018, Zack Sabre Jr. The build-up to this match was excellent, and the match itself was excellent, maybe in part because of the build-up. I'll explain why. In the build-up to this match, Zack Sabre Jr. obviously won the New Japan Cup, tapping out a lot of bigger names. He made Naito tap out, he made Ibushi tap out, people that you wouldn't really expect to see tap out to Zack Sabre Jr. or to anyone, because they're kind of big heroic figures in the New Japan roster. He also in the final made Tanahashi tap out, which was very shocking indeed. But could he go one stage further and make Okada tap out? Well, at the start of the match, it was Okada going for the submissions, which fits perfectly into his cocky, arrogant character. He wants to say, look, I can do your style better than you. And of course he couldn't. And Zack Sabre Jr. took advantage and started working for submissions of his own. Then obviously when it broke down into a more traditional wrestling match, Okada had the upper hand because he's the best wrestler in the world at that style, in storyline and maybe even in real life as well. And Zack was kind of clinging on a little bit, but then you always know with Zack Sabre Jr. the danger is that he can just snag a limb out of nowhere. This match really was a lot different in terms of atmosphere to a lot of Okada's matches, but I think that's probably a good thing because Okada's been in for a bit of criticism recently in that a lot of his matches have felt a bit samey, no matter who the opponent is. And I think it was really wise of New Japan to book him against Zack to really refresh him, because you can't really have a match with Zack Sabre Jr. without it seeming like a Zack Sabre Jr. match, if that makes sense. The ending came with Okada just going for rainmakers like out of everywhere because he was so desperate to put away Zack. I think he really sold the apprehension well of being caught in a submission that he couldn't escape from. And even though apparently I did some research, apparently Okada's only tapped out once in his New Japan career against, I think, Nakamura. But there was always the question of whether he would tap out here just because Zack Sabre Jr. has tapped out so many other really strong wrestlers in the build-up, as I mentioned. But Okada blasted him with a desperation rainmaker, kept hold of the arm, scooped him up, hit another one, went for a third, and Zack reversed it into his like abdominal, like his weird multi-limb hold that he does, one of many multi-limbed holds that he does. And everyone thought, wow, this was really believable because Zack has made so many people tap out, but will Okada tap out? Ultimately, no. Okada managed to somehow reverse it and hit one final rainmaker for the pin. This was an epic match, and while I mentioned that the junior heavyweight title match felt shorter than it did, this match felt exactly the same length as it was, which isn't a criticism so much as it was supposed to be a grueling, epic war between two of the strongest men currently on the New Japan roster. There were more fireworks after the match as well because Okada was challenged by Tanahashi. Now, Okada and Tanahashi have had one of the best rivalries in New Japan history, and I think it's easy to forget that a little bit for Western newer audiences such as myself because of the whole Omega-Okada feud, which was just one of the most insane things we've ever seen. It took wrestling to a new level. But Okada and Tanahashi had a feud which could be regarded by many as good as Omega-Okada, even better in terms of storyline. They wrestled more times, each match referred to the one before it and that sort of thing. Very epic story matches. If you've got New Japan World, do check them out because they're brilliant. And Tanahashi came out and challenged Okada again because he wants Okada's reign to be cut short, and he doesn't want Okada to, have as many defenses as Tanahashi did when he was heavyweight champion. It's a really epic storyline, and I think part of the problem with Okada's reign has been that a lot of his opponents have no chance. You can't see them being Okada at all. Even Zack Sabre Jr., who's been the most believable one since Naito, even he, I couldn't really, honestly in my heart, buy as being Okada. But can I buy Tanahashi being Okada? Absolutely. He's the John Cena of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, obviously, I can't wait for that match, but I also can't wait for a lot of matches that were set up by this pay-per-view, such as Ospreay versus Kushida and that sort of thing. So I think while Sakura Genesis on the whole was a very good show, I think it could be overshadowed by the next big show, which I guess is probably Dominion, where many of these title matches would probably take place. So I guess time will tell whether we look back on this show as a good one in its own right, or a good setup to an even better thing in the summer. So very exciting either way. Thank you very much for watching my review and my look at what happened at Sakura Genesis. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. You can follow me on Twitter at JackTheJobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic, and please do check out our Patreon as well, patreon.com/Cultaholic. Look out for our reactions as well, and the lovely punishment which will come in the days following. Thanks once again for watching, and never forget, of course, to join us.